The first thing you need to do and need to know about their lamp is, of course, the model number. There's several places on the lamp that you can find the model number. The first place, which would be true for any model, would be on the wick raiser knob. Okay, so it'll tell you a number on top of the knob there. Another place on some of the older lamps, you might be able to find it on the flame spreader. Not all models looked exactly like this that had a hole in the middle. Some of them were actually flat on top, and so they printed Aladdin and the number right on the top of the flame spreader. So that's not going to be true for all models, but some older ones had them there. And we're going to talk about the newer Max Bright models. Those are going to actually have the model printed on the burner basket. So we'll talk about that. But again, that's only going to be on the newer ones, not the older ones. So the standard universal, look to the wick raiser knob. All right, and some people do confuse lamps with Aladdins. They think they have an Aladdin because there are a lot of round wick lamps out there that have a wick that looks maybe similar to an Aladdin. If the knob does not say Aladdin on it, it's not an Aladdin. Every model had the word Aladdin printed on there, so if it doesn't say that, it's not an Aladdin. And if it doesn't use a mantle, it's not an Aladdin. Those are two key things that they have to have. All right, so models from 1909 to the present. So you can see there's an image there of all of the different knobs from way back when. You'll notice the first several don't actually have a number on them, but they do say Aladdin. Starting with number 5 is when they started putting the numbers on there. So we'll talk about some significant model changes through the years. The first key change is the burner draft style. So models 1 through 12 were what was called a center draft, which means that the bottom of the lamp actually had a hole in it. So you can see the picture there, that's the bottom of the lamp. That hole went all the way up through the center, up into the burner. The bottoms of the lamps had little holes going around the bottom, and that's where the air would come in through the bottom and would travel up. So that was what was known as a center draft. Starting with model A is when they moved to the side draft, which is what we have now. So the burner basket has the holes. It was during that time that they were able to introduce the glass fonts. So models 1 through 12 were all just metal because of the hole in the bottom. Once they redesigned it, went to the center draft, then they were able to introduce glass models. All right, some other changes would be the gallery and the chimney style. We talked about heelless and locks-on. So models 1 through 11, 23A, and our current model, the Max Bright, are all heelless, which is the smooth bottom, and the gallery that has the raised tabs around it. The 12 through 23 were the locks-on version. So it was the flat top gallery and the chimney that has the notches that you turn it and lock it into place. Another change you could talk about would be the mantles. There were slightly different mantle styles as well. The locks-on is currently the only model that we have available in that. So the current model, which is our Max Bright 500 series, the previous model was the 23A. So we talked about last year some of the changes. We'll talk about them again just to kind of review since it is still kind of new. So between the different styles, the different models, things that changed. The first thing was the wick raiser knob. So we have the new logo on there. It's new, it's round. Remember the older ones were kind of an octagon shape. They changed the metal that the wick raiser is made with, so it actually stays a little cooler to the touch than the old model did. With the burner basket, model 23 was known for some air leaks, which would cause it to burn kind of inefficiently at times. It would cause some spiking, different things like that. So they took the burner basket and they retooled it. They tightened things up. They got rid of a lot of those leaks, so that's more efficient. There's also more holes in the bottom, which is a little hard to see. Right one. So there's 4 little pinholes on the underside of the burner. The older models just had 1 or 2 in there. What that does is as the fuel is traveling up, if it's not used, it tends to pool inside the burner. Those holes let it drain back down into the font. So there's a couple extra holes in there to help with that. The outer wick tube was slightly changed. It looks very similar to the way that it looked before. They changed the number of dimples on the side, and it's just a slightly different shape, but to the naked eye it looks very similar. And the flame spreader has just one notch. The old one, you can see, has 2 notches in there on the bottom. The new one just has 1. So again, they look, to the naked eye, they look very similar, but you can tell the difference because of the 1 notch versus the 2. All right, and the chimneys were redesigned as well. Again, they look very, very similar with the exception of the change in logo. They added the caution statement around the bottom, but they did slightly change the shape just a little bit just to maximize the airflow. MaxBrite 500, we actually have a new 501 that was introduced. So there was just a few slight changes with the 501 coming out. The first change is that flame spreader that we talked about, they redesigned that. So last year, remember we talked about there was a new SKU for the MaxBrite flame spreader that could only be used with the MaxBrite burners. They redesigned them slightly so that now you can use that N106, the old number, with any model back to 12. So that newer SKU they got rid of, the N106 works again, okay? And like I mentioned before, if it doesn't fit, if it's just a little too tight, you can sand down the edge just a little bit to try to get it to fit a little better. All right, another change they made was on the burner basket. They're printing the model and lot number. So in the image that you can see there, you can see mod 501 for model 501. And then the date is the lot. So it's hyphenated between every 3 digits. So 201, 611. So what that stands for is 2016, year 2016. 11 was the month, so November. So you'll be able to tell just by that printing on that burner when exactly they got their burner, when it was made. But those hyphenations, you have to keep that in mind, so figure that how that works, okay? All right, usually when we change models, the Wick razor knob will change. The Wick razor knob is actually staying the same. It's gonna say just model 500. They're all part of the 500 series. There wasn't really enough changes to go to a completely new model, so they're all within 500, so that knob is gonna stay the same. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the previous version, the 23 and 23A, just because we're still gonna get a lot of calls for those, being the most previous model. It's important to understand that not all Model 23s are the same. So it's important to not only ask them what model they have, but if they say 23, you're going to want to ask a couple of follow-up questions to find out exactly if they have a locks-on or a heelless. Early 23s were the locks-on version. Okay. The later 23s were or are heelless. So would have been nice if they would have made like a 24 instead of keeping 23 to make it a little bit different, but they didn't. So the one thing that you can tell the difference between, there were 2 separate knobs, sort of. The 23A added the little genie lamp indentation on the bottom of the Wick razor knob, so that can kind of clue you in that it's a different one. But simply asking what their gallery looks like or what the chimney looks like, you should be able to tell which version they need.